We're moving on to our next story here, and that is about RFK Jr. So some big news has actually been announced about RFK Jr.'s campaign. And that is that it seems like he has narrowed down who he is considering to be his running mate. And those choices are now Aaron Rodgers, quarterback Aaron Rodgers, and Jesse the Body Ventura. Let's get into this clip here from NBC News. And I want to tell you what I think about these picks.
Juan Hilliard, one of the things that could take a bite out of the number of voters going for either President Trump or President Biden or former President Trump, depending on sort of how you see it, is Robert F. Kennedy Jr. And I think about this because I think that the reporting has suggested that perhaps an RFK campaign could be more damaging to Donald Trump than Joe Biden. I don't know if that's the conventional wisdom, but it seems as from some of the focus groups that have been out there, that is where things are, from some of the polling as well. And now we have a sense of the Veep stakes for him, right? And it is from MVP to VP. Maybe Aaron Rodgers? What?
Hallie, what? Aaron Rodgers took 4 snaps last year. Maybe politics may be a better option for him going forward here.
But he wants to play next season.
He wants to play next season. And who says that you can't run for president of the United States or vice president of the United States where you're also playing on the football field?
You are right. There is no law to prevent that.
And you got a pretty good fan base tuning in for those games. That's kind of free campaign advertising, if you will. Look, Aaron Rodgers is the vice presidential pick. It says a lot about the state of our politics here today.
But explain that. How did this even get into the conversation? Like, what is happening?
Well,
all right, let me explain this part. So for people wondering, why would he even consider quarterback Aaron Rodgers? Well, remember, Aaron Rodgers actually got a lot of heat from the NFL during the pandemic. Remember, he was very skeptical about the jab and he had disagreements in reference to mandates. So when it comes to that particular issue, him and RFK Jr. do have agreement there. So I'm wondering, that's probably the reason why he decided, or he's considering Aaron Rodgers. Also, Aaron Rodgers has been very vocal on a number of issues. I don't know if everyone remembers this, because I'm going to show you a smear piece that CNN just did about Aaron Rodgers after this was announced. Aaron Rodgers actually was one of the NFL players that stood in solidarity with the Black Lives Matter movement. I don't know if everyone remembers, but he had interviews about this. He also was one of the one of the football players that was willing to say, no, we need to stand, with our, comrades here, et cetera, even though fans were actually booing him at Green Bay. I'll never forget that. Aaron Rodgers was the one that said, we need to stand in solidarity with the BLM movement. And they came out onto the field and they decided to lock arms. And the fans in the stadiums were actually booing their own team because they decided to do that. So it's not just the pandemic that he was vocal about. He was also very vocal and stood in solidarity with the BLM movement.
One, RFK Jr., the former Democrat turned independent last year. He wanted to run for president of the United States as an independent. And on the ballot in a good number of states, you've got to make an announcement about who your running mate is going to be. And so there's a time clock. It was a month ago that he told me he was going to make his announcement within the month. He bypassed that own self-imposed deadline. And there are serious question marks of who he would select. And frankly, it's not like you've been seeing folks eagerly run and raise their arms saying, we are supporting Kennedy for president or want to be his VP. The other individual who is up for consideration, according to Kennedy, is Jesse Ventura, the former Minnesota governor. And so for this ticket, I mean, there's the chance of spoiling it for Donald Trump or Joe Biden. And a lot of that is going to evolve. I was at a Kennedy event a couple weeks ago, and I was talking to folks that were there. There were some folks that told me they would otherwise vote for Joe Biden, a good number that told me they would vote for Donald Trump if Kennedy wasn't in the race, and then others that said they wouldn't vote at all. He has sort of this weird, complex group of folks, most who are anti-vax or anti-COVID restrictions, but others, he kind of has the message of anti-corporations, anti-big oil, pro-environment, more democratic type policies. So it's a kind of a weird mix of folks that come from really both sides of the political spectrum, Hallie.
See, notice he didn't mention what I mentioned to you, which is the other things about Aaron Rodgers that he's also stood for. Notice they mentioned the anti-jab thing, right? So It's interesting with Jesse Ventura, though, because I say this because Jesse Ventura is anti-war. We all have seen, and I've covered this before, about RFK Jr.'s stance in reference to Israel. This is why I've said a number of times, RFK Jr. is not my candidate. I can't vote for anyone who is on that pro-Israel train. And I also can't vote for someone that puts out a statement that says we need to give Israel the weapons and things that they need. So if you remember when that happened, RFK Jr. actually received a lot of criticism from some of his supporters who said, you were supposed to be the peace candidate. That's what you said when you were running. And now here you are saying we need to give Israel these weapons and give them everything that they want. So the mask was off with RFK at that point, where people realized, no, he's not anti-war. Jesse Ventura is, though. So it could just be that Jesse Ventura is maybe willing, we don't know yet, but maybe willing to work with RFK because RFK is running as an independent, or maybe he agrees with RFK Jr. on some of these other issues. Last time Jesse Ventura was on this show, he did say he was in support of Andrew Yang's Forward Party, but since then has broken away from, I guess, being a part of a third party and said that people should run as independents. When he was governor of Minnesota, remember, he did not run through the Democratic Party or the Republican Party. And the reason, he said on this show, why he was able to win is because he was on the debate stage. So Jesse Ventura is a good debater. I do want to mention that. So that's important for people to know. And he's been very, a strong advocate about people running outside of the duopoly. So there's that. Some people may ask, why didn't he choose to align himself with Jill Stein and the Green Party, or with Cornel West, or with Claudia de la Cruz? Jesse Ventura already had his experience with the Green Party. And I asked him on my show, why not help out the Green Party? And he said, because they're a mess, Sabrina. That's what he told me. He said they're a mess. So I can see why he would decide to stay away from that. In reference to Claudia de la Cruz, she's running through PSL, and maybe he feels like she's not going to have enough ballot access, so why entertain that? Party for Socialism and Liberation, and Jesse Ventura does not identify as a socialist, right? So then that leaves Cornel West, and then also a similar thing. I don't think they agree on most of the policies on Dr. West's platform. So the next person he would probably be the closest in reference to, or closely aligned to in reference to policy, probably would be RFK Jr., minus the war issue there. So yeah, it's interesting.
Yvonne Hilliard, thank you for being across all of it tonight. Appreciate it.
Thanks for watching.
Okay, now I want to get to this piece here because there's more about this. As I told you, they are already starting to smear Aaron Rodgers. Aaron Rodgers has not said yes, no, anything. He has not been confirmed. But here come the smears about Aaron Rodgers. And this was from CNN. This was announced immediately after he was considered as one of the prospects.
In 2013, when CNN's Pamela Brown was covering the Kentucky Derby, she was introduced to Rodgers. Hearing that she was a journalist at CNN, Rodgers began attacking the news media for, quote, covering up important stories. Rodgers then brought up the Sandy Hook shooting and said the news media was intentionally ignoring that the shooting wasn't real, that it was a government inside job. I remind you, the shooting, of course, was very real, very tragic. 20 children and 6 adults were murdered that day. When Pamela Brown asked Aaron Rodgers for evidence of what he was talking about, Rodgers then began sharing various theories that have been disproven numerous times by evidence. Rodgers falsely claimed to Pamela Brown that there were men in black in the woods by the school, and he asked if she thought that was odd. Brown says that she found the entire encounter disturbing.
So you see what's happening. So they're trying to smear Aaron Rodgers there. They're trying to say that he was a part of, or one of the people that bought into the whole Sandy, Hook conspiracy thing. So they're trying to use that against him. There's going to be more of this as we get closer to November, you guys. This isn't over. My thing is, if you're going to criticize RFK Jr., criticize him based on his stance on Israel, right? If you're going to come after him in reference to that, that's what I criticize him on. The other thing I criticized him on was flip-flopping on police reform. He said one thing and then he flipped to something else. And I don't think that his plan that he has on his website, his racial, equality plan that some people have referred to as reparations, that's actually not reparations. And I think he's asking for the bare minimum in reference to minimum wage. We're past $15 minimum wage. It needs to be way more than that at this point. But that being said, I just feel like the smears are starting to come because they know that RFK Jr. is a threat, especially according to the polls. I already showed you guys the polling in Arizona. The fact that RFK Jr. in the poll I showed you, I think it was 2 weeks ago, has 22% support in Arizona, and Trump and Biden are tied at 34% in Arizona. He is going to be a factor in a state like Arizona, in a state like Georgia, which Joe Biden actually won in 2020. I don't think Joe Biden's going to win Arizona and Georgia this time around, but we'll have to, wait and see for all of that. So they do consider him to be a threat. And Jesse Ventura actually had announced this in February this year. I support all third party and independent candidates running for U.S. president this year, from Cornel West to Dr. Jill Stein to RFK Jr. and everyone else not running under the Democrat and Republican Party banner. We must end the duopoly of Republican and Democrat control in Washington. Electing a third party or independent candidate for president would be a major kickstart to that process. But in order to do that, you have to have ballot access. That is why this Monday, February 5th, at the Fox Theater in Tucson, Arizona, I'll be introducing RFK Jr. at a voter rally to get him on the ballot. Find out the details here. So he posted this February 3rd of 2024. So again, like I said, Jesse Ventura, he's consistent when it comes to working outside the duopoly. He's not one of those people that's going to come to you and say, well, you just got to vote for Joe Biden. He stands by that, right? And he won. He won as a candidate that ran outside of the duopoly. Now, he actually had a speech here when he talked about his support for RFK Jr. And I want you to hear this speech from Jesse.
I'm here in support of Robert F. Kennedy's bid for president of the United States. And I support this because I have been a person of the third party my entire political career and my entire adult lifetime. I go way back. I voted for John Anderson back in 1980. For those of you that are old enough to remember that. So I have been a third party person my entire life. I support the third party movement. Ralph Nader had it best when he called it the two-party dictatorship, because that's what it is. And
it's really interesting now, too, considering Ralph Nader, and I don't know what's going on with Ralph Nader, because he's been seen making quotes saying he would do whatever he could to help Joe Biden. Now, he denied making that statement on his interview with Bree on Bad Faith Podcast, but that is what they printed in the interview that he had. I believe that was with the Washington Post. So Ralph Nader scares me a little bit because he's always been preaching against the duopoly. But I feel like he also has a little bit of Trump derangement syndrome, where he feels like in the end, you're going to have to go with Joe Biden so we don't get Donald Trump again. I think some people are just deathly afraid of Donald Trump. And for me, I'm like, we've had both. We've had Trump and we've had Joe Biden. OK, so I just feel we need to move outside of the duopoly. So
you're seeing right now, the very reason we need to elect somebody other than Democrats or Republicans. And that reason is this. You're seeing it right now with this border bill where they put their party before the country.
So yeah, that was the speech that he gave at a Kennedy event. And I think that, you know, what's really interesting when I think about like Jesse Ventura, he's a great speaker. Again, he has the experience. He has been governor of Minnesota, and he has also had the experience of running outside of the duopoly. He's been on the debate stage. He knows what it takes to get onto the debate stage. I think if RFK Jr. is going to choose between the two, I think the better option would be Jesse Ventura. Plus, Aaron Rodgers said he still wants to play football this year. So I don't know how Aaron Rodgers is going to play football, you know, and still try to like be vice president or something like that, because Aaron Rodgers what's he going to do? Make calls from the field and be like, and vice president quarterback Aaron Rodgers. Hold on, I got to take a call. You know, it's a lot, like, and that schedule is pretty draining, like during football season. But I also just think like Jesse has more experience, so I could probably see him choosing him instead of Aaron Rodgers. You know, that being said, though, I've said this time and time again, if RFK Jr. were to change his position on Israel and Gaza, he would also pull some of that support away from Joe Biden. Actually, he'd probably pull a lot of support away from Joe Biden because you have, you know, numbers of people out in the streets, a part of the pro-Palestinian marches. I participated in those marches, and they really would just love, you know, I think someone who has a name as big as him and is actually pulling a lot of, or getting a lot of support right now, to change on that position. But we know that's not going to happen, right? RFK Jr. has been questioned about this multiple times. Some of the statements he made on Breaking Points I also said were very cringe. So it is what it is. He's not my candidate, but some people do still support him. And they said they're willing to, you know, overlook that or hopefully move him on that issue. I don't think he can be moved on that issue. And I also asked Dennis Kucinich about that when I interviewed him as well. I don't think it's going to happen. Now, he did have an interview recently on Fox News, and he's actually challenging Joe Biden and Donald Trump to a debate. And if his percentage points actually continue to hold, that could be the case. You need 15%, you're on the debate stage. So let's get into this.
Robert F. Kennedy Jr., witnessing a good deal of this, he gets back with the notion as an independent candidate for president of the United States that this is part of the problem. These guys, the two presidential candidates right now, repeat of the last rate, are the problem. Kind enough to join us. Robert, good to see you.
Good to see you again, Neil. Thanks for having me back.
Same here. Let me ask you a little bit about what you made of this back and forth on Robert Hur, and more particularly his issue. He didn't take a prosecutorial issue with the president because of his age, because of his memory problems, significant memory problems. What did you think of that?
Well, you know, I haven't read the transcripts, but, you know, the issues that he pointed out, that President Biden couldn't remember specific things that you would think he'd remember when he was vice president, under the dates when he was vice president under President Obama. Under President Obama, the date of his son's death and a number of other things are worrying. I think that it's important for President Biden to do what he did the other night, which is actually come out in public, but more importantly, to have unscripted debates, unscripted encounters with voters, to engage in the debate, which Americans expect from a presidential candidate.
Pause here for a second. So he's speaking about this testimony from special counsel Hur about Joe Biden's mental acuity, right? So he's talking about this, and he mentioned the debate that Americans expect to debate. There have been rumblings that Joe Biden is not going to debate Donald Trump. And I think that's BS. If that were to happen, I think he should have to debate. I think all of them should have to debate. It's, you know, that's a way for Joe Biden to kind of hide and run away from this, his mental issues that he's having. And it would also It would scream to the American people that Joe Biden is not up for the job. So I think that he should debate Donald Trump. I don't care if both of them have been president already. That is not what this is about. You're supposed to debate. You're supposed to talk about your plans for the country and let the American voters decide who they're going to choose or which way they want to go. But you don't rob the American people of having that type of choice. And I think it would be a mistake. I think it would be a disaster if the DNC told Joe Biden, you don't have to debate because both of you have already been president. That would be a disaster. And I don't think the American people would go for that. I think people would actually hit the streets. I really do.
And, to show this is a job, Neil, that requires a lot of nuance, of complexity of mind, of acuity, mental acuity, and we have a right to assurances that the person who's in charge of taking that phone call at 3:00 in the morning, when all of our children's lives are at stake, that they're going to make good judgments and the best decisions, and that they're going to be on their toes. So I think it's important for him to persuade the American public, to show the American public he can do that, particularly after these kind of questions have been officially raised, not only by the prosecutor, but also the mainstream media is now talking about some of these issues.
Yeah, whether he's too old for the job. Now, you had said, and a lot of people who like the president said that he brought his A game to a State of the Union address. You did not agree. You had said that it was a hyper-partisan speech. You're similarly not a huge fan of Donald Trump's, and it looks like those two guys are not keen on debating each other. It might happen, but it doesn't look like it will. What do you think of all of that?
Well, I think we're living at a time when the two least popular mainstream mainstream party candidates in the history of our country are running. Both of them would actually win the prize for the least popular candidate in the history of a major political party. 80% of the public says that they don't want a rematch of 2016. They want other choices. And now it's a three-man race. As of today, I think both candidates will clinch their party's nomination in the three primaries that are being held today, and we'll be entering the general election. And I would hope that both of these candidates will debate, and we should start talking about the issues that concern Americans: the chronic disease epidemic, the destruction of our soils, the forever wars.
You have to get in on that debate. You have to get in on that debate.
So this shouldn't even be an issue, especially considering it is the Democratic Party right now that's continuing to say we have to protect our democracy. But it shouldn't even be a possibility that there isn't going to be a debate. There's just no way. There's just absolutely no way. And I think people want to see a debate, right? So I feel like it shows the American people just how flawed our electoral system is, and not just flawed, but how it's rigged. So you can't get upset when people complain and say it's all rigged and you're doing the things you're doing right now. If RFK Jr. can hold on to at least 15%, he would be on the debate stage. If they have debates. If they don't have debates, he won't be on the debate stage. Same thing with Jill Stein. Same thing with Claudia de la Cruz. So this could be a way, pay attention, folks, because this could be a way that the DNC chooses to basically hide the third party and independent candidates, especially if any of them get to that 15%. They'll just say, nope, we're not having any debates. We don't want them on the world stage. Now, what's interesting is that RFK Jr. is saying that he wants to debate Biden and Trump, but he was not present at the third party independent debate that I covered on this show. There were the two libertarian candidates. There was Jill Stein, Claudia de la Cruz, and Jasmine Sherman. RFK Jr. and Cornel West were not present at the third party and independent debate, and they were invited. According to the Free and Equal organization that actually hosted that debate, they said they invited all of them. All of them were invited. So if RFK Jr., you want to debate, why didn't you debate at that third party and independent debate? I know it's not Joe Biden and Donald Trump, but still. It's interesting.
Independent candidate. You've gotten on a few more states now. Last time I checked, New Hampshire, Utah, Hawaii, Nevada, very close to Georgia. I could go on and look at South Carolina, Alabama. But you need to get on a lot more state ballots. And there's been talk that you're going to become a libertarian. They're interested in you. Any truth to that? That could get you on pretty much all of them.
Yeah, we will be on all the state ballots, and we've now launched. Today, actually, we're launching a push to get us on all the ballots that are open today at this point within 4 to 6 weeks. And as they open, we will have 4 to 6 weeks to get on each one, and we will make those deadlines.
All right. When you say you make those deadlines, then you would be more than a spoiler, right? If you're on all the state ballots, you have a real crack at it, and more than just getting a spoiler role. But the traditional wisdom is you hurt President Biden more than you hurt Donald Trump. What do you say?
That's not what I've seen. That's not what I've seen in the numbers. It appears he seems to be, I'll have to look at a new poll, double check, but it seems like he's actually pulling more away from Donald Trump than Joe Biden. Like I said, I'll have to go back and check and see if there's a newer poll that I missed somewhere. But we have to stop, when people call you a spoiler, you have to push back on that. Like we have to get away from that rhetoric. These people aren't spoilers. These people are candidates. You don't have to like them. You ain't got to vote for them. You ain't got to agree with them. But these people are not spoilers. That's what a democracy is about. Free and fair elections. To say that someone is a spoiler because they're not running as a Republican or they're not running as a Democrat, that's ridiculous.
I mean, my intention is to hurt both of them. Right now I'm beating both candidates and independent voters, and independents are the biggest part. This is the first election in history, Neil, where independents are the biggest voting bloc. So independents now represent 43% of American voters, self-identified independents. Republicans are only 27, Democrats are only 27, and I'm beating both candidates in independents. I'm also beating them by really dramatic margins, by 40%, among Americans who are under 35 in the battleground states. I'm beating them among Americans under 45. So I'm tied in a three-way tie for Hispanic votes, and that vote is increasing for me. I'm really winning in all of the major demographics, except with one exception, which is baby boomers. And we believe that we're going to start making inroads with them soon. So I think we have a very good chance of winning in November.
Very interesting there. LPA Film says, I was about to say independent voters are heavily leaning towards RFK. Yeah, there's that as well. And another one I think that was not mentioned, he's increasing among Hispanic voters. He's also increasing among African-American voters. He has 13%. Last poll I saw, 13% support from African-American voters. Same thing with Cornel West. They were in that same poll, 13% African-American voters. Donald Trump, 15% from African-American voters. He has increased his support. These are all the people these people pulled away, from Joe Biden, pulled away from the Democratic Party. So it is really interesting. And I keep telling people, I've said this multiple times, if I was Joe Biden and Donald Trump and any of these candidates that are running against RFK, they really need to be coming after RFK. I know they feel like he's not a threat, or they feel like it's not going to matter because they think he's not going to be on these ballots. But I heavily disagree based on what I've seen. And I think that they should actually consider him to be a real contender. Now, I don't agree with his policies. I'm not voting for him, but the writing is on the wall. And all this time, Joe Biden more so has been avoiding RFK Jr. But he is now, seems like he's choosing between Jesse Ventura and Aaron Rodgers. Very interesting. Also, popular people. Notice both of those options, they're popular people. right? Let's go to some of the comments here. Frank says, damn, I love Ventura, but RFK Jr. is a piece of crap. Leon says RFK Jr. is pro increasing police funding. Yes, he is. And I covered that. Amanda says, I just saw a title by Kim Iverson or thumbnail that also included Arnold Schwarzenegger. Interesting. Arnold Schwarzenegger. But see, the problem with Arnold Schwarzenegger is he can't be president. He talked about this before. So he can't be. So if something were to happen to the president and he's the vice president, he can't step in because he wasn't born here. So he has the same issue that Cenk has as well. We'll get into that. Thank you for the super chat, New York. Ventura ran as an independent, won and had a surplus 3 of his 4 years. A vet/Navy SEAL, anti-war, free speech, anti-party, NPP, a real one. Thank you, B-Man. The only candidate against aiding Israel is Jill Stein. Also, way back when Ron Paul called Israel an apartheid state. Yeah, Case Study QB actually had talked to me about that recently. Ilhanner says Tucson. Tucson is how you say it, Sabby. I don't know. I've never been there. Thank you, the peace. I have been doing some research and found out how much high-ranking Zionist people have shaped our laws since World War II in the Middle East, even in Congress, shaping the war in Gaza. Follow the money. We continue to talk about how Zionism has a strong, hold in the world, not just in reference to electoral politics in the United States. Thank you, B-Man. Jesse just lost me. He's angry because border bill wasn't passed. Bill was just money for Ukraine and Israel. Yeah, they bundled that together. This is why we need single subject bills. Boogie Boogie Barnes, hit the streets and 45 still going to turn into 47. Sabby, what do you think about Rashida Tlaib running third party like Brianna suggested yesterday to Cenk? I think it needs to be someone who's not already in Congress because they've already been corrupted in some way, shape, or form. Rashida Tlaib, yes, she's been very vocal in reference to the Palestinian people, and she's spoken out, about her people. I will give her that. She spoke out against the railroad workers not being allowed to go on strike, and she voted in support of the railroad workers. I'll give her that. But I think it needs to be someone who's not already in that DC bubble. Thank you for the super chat, R. Bailey. Biden's age should not be in question. His mental condition should be. Well said. And thank you, Janine. RFK didn't go on that debate to make sure his supporters didn't see the other candidates. He knows they are better than him. Interesting, Janine. Interesting points.